Dr. Deepika Mathur with the WARC project and implications for regional councils with island communities.
Thank you for coming. And before I start, I would like to acknowledge the Laratia people from this region and the Aranda people from the land where I come. But most importantly for this project, I would like to thank the traditional owners of the West Anand region who allowed us and gave permission to conduct this research in that area. And we hope from this work that we can help protect that beautiful ancient land and water where they live. So we've heard enough about the circular economy. I'm not going to go into that. But I would just like to highlight that this is a national directive. And as Leonie talked yesterday, she's come up with a circular economy plan. While it is a wonderful concept and we do need it to go towards sustainable living, but what it is missing is the connection to the ground reality of different context, what happens in regions, what happens in remote communities, and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect there, and we are trying to raise that issue through this project. So this project, we were asked by West Arnhem Regional Council last year by the then CEO, and what was expected is that we look at the current practices, what is happening in waste, compare it with national and international examples of remote waste management, and then suggest some ways forward. And the expectation was also that it is not just for West Arnhem Regional. Other councils are more than welcome to use this report. I'm not going to go into the detail. The report will be up on our website, or Meredith will have a link, and you can access. I'm only going to talk about the key findings from this project. And so the way that we went about it is that we went to the 5 communities in West Arnhem region and talked to their council service managers, talked to the landfill operators, and apart from that, we also had conversations with recyclers, with freight companies, barge and land freight, and anybody else who wanted to talk to us. And on the basis of that, we came up with certain suggestions. And one thing I would want to say is that it's by no means definitive. It is just a starting point of several conversations. And if there's anything that resonates with what is happening in your remote communities and it can help you arrive at a result, that'd be great. So the first bit is, and I'm sure that everybody knows this already, but I just still want to raise this, that collecting data and reporting is extremely important. And this is even more important because there are no weighbridges. So how do we do that? And that is something that I guess came up with another study in Central Australia. When we don't have any data to work with, we don't know how much is coming in, how much is going out. This is a beautiful table, and we wish we had tables like this for remote communities, but we can't because we don't have that basic information, and it's not an easy task. So I'm not putting it out as a limitation that you have, but I'm putting it out as this is something that I guess the local councils have to work towards, finding ways without a weighbridge to do it. And I'm not sure, and I don't have a solution yet, but I'm happy to work with people and think if there are ways that we can do this better. And the reason why this is important, I'll come to that. And so what we did, we just prepared a form for the council, and a staff member went to the 5 communities, and they collected information on what the various waste streams were. But this is just a snapshot in time. It does not give you indication of the rate of generation of that waste. Has this waste been there forever? This is the sum total from the last 50 years, or has some pieces been removed in the last couple of years? So there is, it's not a dynamic information. So it's good to have as a starting point. It gave us something to work with. And so this is for the landfill, what was there. And for the general waste, we looked at the size of the garbage truck. We talked to the operators and found out how many days it was picked up. Usually, is it full or half full? And that gave us some indication of how much general waste there is.
And what this allowed us to do is that with the conversations with the recyclers and freight and barge companies and that data, we made a one-off plan for each of the communities to get rid of whatever waste there is, so under various categories. And it might not be very clear, but look, it's all in the report, so don't worry about trying to read. And then we made one ongoing plan for them that this is what it's going to cost over time in removing this. And if I haven't mentioned, I should mention that East Arnhem was extremely helpful, and I'm glad they're doing a presentation today, because this process of negotiating with the transporters, with the recyclers, is an extensive one. And needs to be carried out so the figures that we have got now are indicative of what our conversations were, but I guess they will be different because at the end of the day, it will be a negotiation between the council and the truck company or the recyclers. But so I cannot overemphasize the fact that we do need some data, and we have to find out ways of doing it, perhaps with Legant's leadership, or getting all the councils together and finding out what would be a good way to report, what is possible within the limited resources, and how can it be periodically collected, because this is one shot, and it's not, I mean, it is representative to a degree, but we need more ongoing data. The second one is the everyday operations. So material flows are discussed, but what happens at the back end? Because if that waste is not segregated, we really can't go forward. And I think Eileen also mentioned how important segregation is. And so what we found was this amazing commitment in the staff that were working on the landfill. And as one person said, it was a mess when we started. They didn't have the gear or nothing at all. The council got more gear in. We made it all pretty. And we started making it normal, which was not hard to do. We started segregating the bays and all that. So only a person who works in the landfill can find it pretty. I don't think many people will talk, but it just shows the passion and commitment of the people who are working there. And we need to do everything that we can to support them in that work that they do. But their big issue was, so not only did they loved the landfill. They wanted to make it more pretty, but they had certain limitations, if I put it that way. One was talking about the machines. I'll talk about that in the next slide. They were extremely enthusiastic and wanted to know more. And so forums like this, like Legant, quite a few of them raised that and said how that exchange of information between different communities was extremely useful for them. And we didn't realize that they don't get many chances of talking to other operators at other landfills within their council or with other regional councils. So I was quite glad that on Tuesday there was a whole dedicated session where they could all come together and exchange that information. The machines, I can't profess to say that I know exactly what each one does, but we try to get our head around it. So every landfill had a different combination of machines. Somebody had track excavators and graders, someone had an excavator and something else, but they found that they did not have the adequate stuff to do what they wanted to do. If they wanted to grab a car and put it in a stockpile, how would they do it? Out of those 5 landfills, only at one did we have the person on ground who said, well, I have these 3 or 4 machines and I can do everything. So of course there is a way of rotating amongst the different communities, which to keep make efficient reuse of resources, but I think there needs to be a roster and everybody needs to know if that machine has moved to another island, it will come back to me at some point. I think that uncertainty was not, it was not good for the people. Apart from that, the maintenance and repair, because a mechanic will have to go for ongoing maintenance. If something has broken down, then there's a long time period of waiting. And the cost, at one place, they were not ready to use a large machine because they said, if that tire got punctured, it's going to cost us $4,000 for it to go to Darwin and back. So, those kind of maintenance issues come with the part and parcel of a landfill. And the final bit is that when we talk about circular economy, are we talking about the transport logistics of these people? The waste will have to go on barge, the machines have to go on barge, or are we just talking about Alice and Darwin, or worse still, if you're only talking about Southern Australia, and how circular economy works in those regions? And so the last bit that I would want to talk about, taking from there to the next step, is are we just talking about waste management, or are we talking about waste governance? And in my understanding, waste management implies that there is the responsibility is of the state government, of the local government, whereas if we look at it in a waste governance situation, then that responsibility is split among the state and non-state actors, and everybody has to work together. And that came up several times even yesterday, so it's not anything new. But it is absolutely critical that everybody is on the same page, and we are talking about this together. So there are heaps of stakeholders, but what is there to say how much buy-in each person has into a particular project? Are we just listing them as stakeholders, or do we have a commitment from these various organizations, and we are all on the same page and trying to work towards a goal? And Peter's comment yesterday was really good, where he said that they all meet on a regular basis, the industry and the government, and think and talk these things through. So if you're looking at a circular economy situation, we need to have stakeholders from every stage. We can't just leave it to the local government at the end and think all the waste issues are going to be at the end of this whole pipeline. So we have the transport, the consumption, flow in, flow out, the recyclers, so all of them are there. We haven't even talked about the design and the people who are at the first end. And perhaps there we can influence them through procurement, which has again been talked enough. That how do we, if we are strict about what we want through procurement, then perhaps it will influence the designing and packaging of those products. And just to give you a few examples, like the people in that system have to be made a bit more responsible, have to come on the table. So for example, one of the biggest waste we found was of packaging coming out of stores. And so why don't we have Outback stores or Alpa in the room and talking to everyone? Why are their cardboard waste still being burnt at landfill and not being baled and taken back? Or if they want, we can push for their procurement of cling film from more biodegradable materials. I'm just saying a few examples of things that are possible, and we need to include them. Similarly, construction waste, which is one of my favorites. I did have a past life as an architect. So why are we only looking at the end of pipe again and looking at what Eileen is doing, which is wonderful, but how about at the beginning? What is happening at the stage of the tenders? We only write very basic, minimal requirements for waste management for contractors. If it is in the tenders, if it is in the specifications how the waste has to be managed, they should not be allowed to just leave that waste in communities and make it somebody else's problem. And I'll just give you another quote from an interview, which was very well put. Contractors would come and say, oh, we've got excess stuff. We're just going to leave it with you, which sounds really great. It does sound great. You've got some extra steel and you can use it for projects, but the long-term effect, no one uses it. So it's just stored, so then we have excess stored legacy waste. So, we are creating these situations, and so a part of the problem is that we need to start these conversations, and people need to come to the table if they are committed to it. And for the territory and the local government, their role has to be of facilitating this and making it a targeted effort. But first, I think they have to put their own house in order, because the big construction projects are the government projects. So it's Department of Housing, it's Department of Health, education, all of these projects that are getting in the community and creating more and more waste are by the government, and they're not talking to the EPA. So I guess the first connection has to be within government, and then we can talk about them facilitating other ways of getting the stakeholders together. And I just want to give a very quick example of one of these, because these things don't happen organically. We all hope that once we've made that beautiful diagram, things are going to flow and everything will fall into place. So a couple of years back in Darwin, we had this construction waste management symposium. Oh, sorry. And we got all the different stakeholders. You can see Leonie there too in the top corner, and people just sat, and everybody just worked on how can we find better ways of working in the regions, in remote communities, and there were 4 very different solutions that came up. If I was doing it, I wouldn't even have come up with one, but some industry-led, some about procurement, some about something else, but it was a directed effort. And so my point being that somebody has to drive that getting everyone together and having a basic commitment to circular economy or ways forward is important. And just to end it, the 3 things that I would want to highlight from this particular project is the importance of data, whichever way we collect it, but we do need it, what happens at the back end, and how can we support the people who are working and segregating that waste, and the importance of working together. And that's the only way that I think we can even participate in circular economy directive. Thank you. That's it.